Hello world, Liu here, and this is part 11 of the Python from 0 to 1 series. So previously, we talked about how to define and call our own functions in Python. But today, we will talk about useful built-in functions in Python and how we can use them. So firstly, we have our classic print function. So if we print stuff like apple, and if we run this, we'll simply get apple. And similarly, if we print apple, comma, orange, and if we run this again, we'll get apple space orange. And if we add a comma and a pear and a pineapple behind, and if we run this, we'll get apple, orange, pear, pineapple, but with a space in between each fruit. So whatever we print will appear in our terminal over here, known as standard output. So second on this list is the abs function, which stands for absolute. So here, the absolute function will simply convert all negative numbers to positive. So let's say we print ABS and we have negative 100. And if we run this, we'll simply get 100. Conversely, if we pass in a positive 100, we will still get a positive 100. So here, negative becomes positive, and positive remains as positive. And third on this list, we have the input function. So the input function is useful if we want to ask our user to enter something. So let's say we want to ask the user for the name, we can do something like this. Name is equals to input, open and close bracket, and between the brackets, we put in a string. And this string is used to prompt the user. So let's say we want to ask the user for the name, and we do this, enter your name and colon space. So afterwards, let's print name. So when we run this, we'll get this, enter your name, and Python will wait for us to enter something before executing the next line of code. So I'm just going to enter Tom, and only after I hit enter will the next line of code execute. So one thing to note about the input function is that it will always return a string value. So let's say age is equals to input, enter your age, and let's print name and age. And let's also print the type of name and the type of age. And if we run this, we'll get this. So enter a name, let's put Tom. And here, let's put 40. So here, we print Tom and 40, but notice that both of them are strings, even though we enter 40. So once again, the input function will always return a string. And if you want numbers or something else instead, you need to do your own necessary conversion. Next, we have the range function. So on a high level, this function allows us to repeat stuff. So let's say I want to print apple 5 times. So apple, and I can choose to copy and paste this 4 more times. And if I run this, I'm just going to get 5 apples. But I can do this in a much shorter way using the range function and also using a for loop. So here, for I in range 5. So our range function is actually being used here. And after the colon, we need to have an indent here. So if I run this, I'm going to have apple printed 5 times for me. So we'll cover this in more detail later on when we reach for loops. So next, we have the function, which stands for directory. So this function essentially gives us a list of all attributes and methods of an object. So let's test it here. X is equals to apple. And let's say print dir of X. So directory of X means all attributes and methods of X. So let's run this and we'll get this. So we have a bunch of stuff here, and they are all methods or attributes of X, which is a string object. So this function is quite useful if you want to quickly list out all the attributes and methods of an object for documentation purposes. So let's try it with a number now. So let's say X is equals to 100. And if I run this, I'm going to get less stuff because an integer has fewer built-in methods than a string. So we'll cover lists later on, but for now, just think of it as a bunch of stuff. And next on this list is pretty similar to the dir function. So the help function will essentially print out the documentation of a certain object. So here, I'm just going to help and open and close bracket, and whatever we want to print the documentation of, we put inside here. So let's say print. So if we run this, we will get the documentation for the print object. So print is something blah 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 blah. So here, when we reach the end, we simply press Q to get out. So similarly, I can help the help function, and let's see what happens. Define the built-in help. This is a wrapper, blah 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 blah, and a whole bunch of stuff. So once again, when we reach the end, we press Q to get out. And next, we have the length function. So len, which is essentially short for length. So this function helps us find the length of stuff, usually strings, lists, dictionaries, and so on. So let's say x is equals to apple, and let's print the length of x. So here, apple has 5 characters, so we'll simply get 5. However, if I add more stuff to x, and now x is equals to apple pie, and if we run this again, we'll get 9, because now we have 9 characters. So I can also replace x with a list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and this will simply give me 5 once more. So here, just know that the length function can be used for other collections such as lists and dictionaries and so on, but we'll cover these other collections later on. For now, just know that the length function can be used to find the length of stuff in Python. And next, we have the max and min function. So the max and min function stands for maximum and minimum respectively, and they are used to find the maximum and minimum of a collection. So let's say print max of 1, 2, 3, and if I run this, I'm gonna get 3 because 3 is the largest thing here. So let's say -1, -2, and if I run this again, I'm still gonna get 3 because 3 is the largest number here. And if I copy and paste this but replace this with min instead of max, and let's run this, and we'll get -2 because -2 is the most negative number here. So thanks for watching, and hopefully this was clear and easy to understand. See you in the next one.